Stop me from going to Google and typing in movie name space torrent and getting a copy of the movie, which is, if it were going to do what you said it was going to do, that's what it would have to do. It would have to stop me from being able to get the movie without restriction. What it does is it restricts who's allowed to add features to the movie after I buy it. So it doesn't stop me if I download it, but it does stop me if I buy it from getting features added to it except with permission from Microsoft or the rights holder.
Well, probably the rights holders, as Microsoft doesn't have a sort of stake
Microsoft
in
don't serve the rights holders' interest because the technology removes the digital right information. So the thing is that when you can remove the digital right information, you really removes the idea of the law. But the law, as it is written in Norwegian, that you have to buy a lot of advocates and jurists and pay a lot of money. And if you have tried to persuade them and go to the competitive authority, if they understand what you're doing, then you have some chance maybe allowed to buy the thing from you. But then you don't protect the movie artist or the music industry, you protect your own technology.
I'll tell you one thing about Microsoft, actually. This is the greatest irony of them all. So you guys should be standing astride the world like gods, right? You are a giant company, and you come from a giant industry, the $600 billion tech industry, and Hollywood is a small $60 billion industry that you should be crushing like bugs. And instead, you're letting them dictate the design of your devices to add features that none of your customers want, right? You don't have any customers who woke up this morning and said, I wish Windows did less. I wish I could do less with the movies on Windows, right? So what you're doing is you're driving them away from Windows as a platform in order to kowtow to them. And the thing is, the studios hate you guys, right? So at the broadcast flag, the outcome of the broadcast flag was anyone's DRM except Microsoft's and Philips. Because unlike 4C Consortium, the 5C Consortium, and so on, which are divided consortia that they can play one off against the other, Microsoft is a big, strong company like Macrovision. They went with Macrovision as a single preferred supplier for DVDs in the old days. Now Macrovision gets to charge anything they want for licenses, right? The studios are going broke, shoveling boatloads of money at Macrovision. They're not going to make that mistake with Microsoft, right? When I first found out about the European broadcast flag thing, I was sitting in a meeting with some DTI people in England, the Department of Trade and Industry, and they said, oh, you don't need to really worry about what's going on there. They're interested in a fair deal for all Europeans. The only thing that they're really worried about is that Microsoft DRM will become a supplier in Europe, because they absolutely don't want that. You should be doing what Sony did with the VCR, right? Give me the tools to take all the movies from the old wine, pour it in the new bottle, take the lumps in court from them when they come after you for circumvention, which is going to be, trust me, way less action than you got from the antitrust, and you came out of that pretty good. And you'll end up with a product that's superior. Right?
Don't tell them about that. You should enforce DRM strictly.
Yeah.
Go for it. Do it.
And the nice idea, he wouldn't be able to explain his managers that this is possible.
Well, I mean, I gave this talk to managers at Microsoft. I'm hoping that someone at Microsoft.
Yeah, he talks to Microsoft. All the
I'm going to go back. I gave this talk to
yeah.
Nokia. You know, so the thing is, so Nokia, right? I don't get what Microsoft is sucking up. I really don't get what mobile phone carriers are sucking up to the studios, because they come from a $6 trillion industry, right? It's 100 times larger than entertainment. And that's because content, the most valuable content in the world, is a conversation, right? If you and I are talking and they play a little music in the background, it adds almost no value to our conversation. But if you and I are talking and I go, there's this great new album you got to hear, then it adds a ton of value to the music, right? So why is Nokia's business so much bigger than the studio's business? Because they're selling something a lot more value than what the studios have. And what they should be doing is giving their customers the tools to import music, not adding stuff to their phones. That means that means that they can only get music from the studios, that they can only get music from the labels, right? You should be able to, now you can. Nokia's just introduced a 4 GB phone that plays MP3s. But until a little while ago, the mobile carriers were all scared of doing this. They were like, oh, well, we'll introduce OMA phones, right? Where it'll cost us $1 a handset to add DRM to our mobile phones, right? So like if you add DRM to all of, no thank you, to add DRM to all of last year's mobile phones, that's like $670 million. The total market for digital music on mobile phones, all over completely, was $480 million last year, right? So you spend more than the entire industry is worth trying to protect the industry by like a third again. Why are they involved in these activities? They should just be, basically give me the tools to pour my wine into the bottle you sold me. Give me a funnel, and I'll be your customer for much longer than I would be if what you did was try to force me to buy all new wine and throw away all my old wine.
Everyone knows that new wine is much better than old wine.
Yeah,
That's not the
No,
case.
it's the other way around.
Oh, yeah, all right.
So I have
Thank you for enlightening.
someone pointed out to me that so there are companies that told the mobile carriers never to introduce open phones that played MP3s because they said you'll be strangling the nascent ringtone market, right? Which is basically this scam where you buy a tenth of a song for twice what the song cost you on CD, right? And it's like
huge.
I know it's huge.
Scandinavian.
I know it's huge. So. But I've got an alarm clock that plays CDs to wake me up in the morning, right? Am I strangling the nascent alarm tone market? Right? I mean, how many times do I need to buy the same song? If I have to buy the song to play on my phone, why shouldn't I have to buy it to play on my alarm clock? Why shouldn't I? Is there a shower tone market for songs I
Don't
play in
give
the
them the
shower?
idea. They might want to try it.
I mean, and really, when we say, well, isn't
But
DRM
they've succeeded once though.
Well,
because they
they
got
did.
us to buy all the vinyl CD, LPs that we have on
Right.
CDs.
But
I mean,
with-
most of my CDs are vinyl CDs,
But
LPs
then you
that I have
usually
before.
get better quality as well. Or
Sometimes.
Some-
Ask
yeah,
audio
but
files.
You could,
You actually
you could
do it.
say that. So,
Yeah.
but on DVD, you get the films, additional.
But the
information.
miraculous thing about
and
that
you
is
can
it was
rip,
digital.
it's far easier to rip CDs than
Yeah.
LPs.
Correct. I was very happy to hear you
Yeah.
say that you're so confident about winning the Grokster case, but can you tell us why are you so confident?
Oh, because it would be. I think that the most scary, the worst possible outcome we could get out of that is they're going to come up with an incredibly narrowly tailored decision against us, where it's like, if your company started off licensing Openness servers, and then you did this, and your company's name is Grokster, and it's a Wednesday, and the moon is in the 7th house, then you're guilty, right? They're going to cabinet really tightly because anything else is going to be like, it's going to be have way too much impact on general purpose technology makers, including Microsoft. Right? My colleague Fred von Lohman pointed out very intelligently that the only technology the Grokster outcome won't impact is peer-to-peer. Because peer-to-peer software could be written in 11 lines of Perl by teenagers anywhere in the world, right?
One line.
One line of Perl. With a lot of semicolons. Right? One line with a lot of semicolons. But like what this is going to do is impact every every application and technology that requires investment. Because everyone who goes to an investor and says, I'm going to make some technology and I need some money from you, the investor is going to say, well, how do I know that you're not going to fall afoul of Grokster if they find for the MGM in it? And the answer will be, I can't guarantee you that, and they won't go near it. So the only technology that this won't stop is peer-to-peer. Every other technology, I think it'll freeze in its tracks unless you're already capitalized. You're Microsoft, and you're in a position to make a decision about what to do. But Microsoft, a lot of its new technology comes from acquisitions. I once almost sold a company to Microsoft, and Passport came from buying Upendra and Patty from the Media Lab and so on. There's a ton of new acquisitions that result in actual productization. I mean, MSR does great work, but a lot of that stuff never gets productized. A lot of
We're
the
actually
productized
giving
stuff.
it away now.
Well, a little bit, yeah.
20 of
But I've seen stuff
So,
at MSR that's
used.
like nuclear-powered submersible jetpacks. That in comparison with the stuff that MSR has managed to productize so far, and it's not leaving the labs anytime
Why is
soon.
it
It's stuck in the
in the
skunk
labs?
works. Who knows? Why didn't Xerox PARC ever successfully productize anything out of the labs? But Microsoft does a lot of its new stuff through acquisition and through investment. And so, what is it going to invest or acquire after no new company can get capitalized because they're going to have to answer the impossible question: how do you know the studios won't sue you for this? How do you know
They
the
obviously
studios
then
won't?
have to buy Opera.
Yeah. Again.
Interval made a lot of great stuff and got
Yeah. That's a completely separate question. I don't think that's a fault of Microsoft.
I think the Xerox story was just one where they didn't really realize, corporate didn't realize what they really had.
I think that
it.
like maybe after they invented Ethernet and laser printers, they would have.
But I don't think they realized it. They thought they were in a different business.
But they had hit after hit after hit from the spinouts, right? Of the people walking away from Park and starting some other stuff. So they like the writing was on the wall. I mean, so yes, they clearly the problem was that they didn't understand what they had. The question is, why didn't they understand what they had, right? Why are
They
they?
defined themselves as a copying business, or
Oh
I spent some time in Park in 1980.
Yeah.
And it was clear that the park people hated the corporate people and vice versa. They weren't able to talk to each other. And at that time, the Xerox Corporation brought up the Star. And I just, in lunch break, said to the park people, says, what do you think about the Star? It has nothing to do with us. We wash our hands of it.
Well, I mean, that question of why can't you get two business units to cooperate, that's a hard question. You know?
Well, I was in Berkeley actually in the 70s, and they were buying, Xerox Office Park was buying up every PhD that was coming out of Berkeley and Stanford at that time, and you figured they had to be doing something that was really great. They didn't do anything with it by and large. But it was amazing. If you looked at it as a graduate student, you said something is really happening there.
Well, and there were 10 or 15 skunkworks that were generated. I mean, that's where the that's where the microcomputer came from, was skunkworks like that who were competing with them to yeah, have you read the guy from the New York Times in Silicon Valley, John
Gilmore?
No.
Steely Brown? No.
Markov. Markov has a new book about the relationship of counterculture, psychedelic drugs, and the early computer pioneers, who are all apparently they were all involved in early acid. Steve Jobs was part of this group that was doing heavy acid experimentation with LSD.
Speaking of Jobs, where do you think he wants to go in the longer term? Do you think? I mean, he's no longer a computer company. He's really into the media business. It's media distribution business. It would seem.
I think that's exactly what's going on. I think that the ultimate impact of that he is going to have on the music industry if he pulls it off is he's going to essentially be the record label.
Exactly.
Right? There will be a bunch of suppliers to him, and then he'll be the record label.
And that's why
which is what
Sony
he's
has
trying
done
to
what
do.
they've done in terms of getting a Brit in there.
Yeah, and this is why MP3 is the only answer, right? MP3 is mutually assured destruction for all of these guys, or not MP3, OGG, whatever. Your open format, a format you can freely implement. And that has no DRM and no anti-circumvention restriction is the mutually assured destruction, because it takes all of these different dreams of grandeur and it puts paid to them, because really it's not good for the music industry or for us as music fans to have only one record label, or to have one small consortium of record labels that control the distribution channels. So that's and the device ecosystem, right? Like it's not good for me as an iPod owner that the person who made my iPod gets to restrict who gets to add players to my iPod. Right? It's not good for me that I can't listen to real music on my iPod as an iPod player. Right? It's just like, how did Windows get to be the dominant platform? Because all the software ran on it, right? And what's Windows' current defense against Linux and Microsoft? The first thing a Windows advocate will tell a CIO who's thinking about migrating to Linux and Mac, it's, none of your software is going to run on it. Right. Well, so from an end user's perspective, having all the software run on your platform is sort of job one, and DRM stops software from running on your platform.
But Apple is an interesting case simply because it seems like they're staying a little bit ahead of the curve, and they're making money on that outer layer, and they're allowing this sort of inner layer, the problems that have been solved. The underlying OS, they're open sourcing that stuff. They're letting other people deal with those problems, and they're focusing on the layer where the money is.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The money is in music right now. The money is in the pretty sexy OS that you got up there. That's where the cash is, and that's where he's focusing. And you have to wonder if the next layer is going to come in, and then this one's going to open source.
Well, and that's what you just described is the market, right? You start off with margin, and then your competitors come in, and your margin falls down to the marginal cost of goods and your product becomes commodified, and you invent something else, and it becomes commodified, and you invent something else, and it becomes commodified, and if you just get to invent one thing and exclude everyone else from making more of it, you've got alchemy. Right, like the difference. This is Eric Raymond's riff, right? The difference between chemistry and alchemy. Alchemy, no one told anyone how it worked, and no one was allowed to improve on it. It was all proprietary, and there was no one ever got to commodify it. And so every alchemist had to discover the hard way that drinking mercury was bad for you, right? and then the alchemists started to publish, right? They became open source, and when they became open source, alchemy was commodified, right? You were no longer a wizard if you knew alchemy. You were simply someone who'd read a book about it. But on the other hand, alchemy turned into chemistry. Right, and all of a sudden, alchemy actually produced useful results instead of people dead of mercury poisoning.
Cory, do you want to work at a business school? Because this is kind of what
we already talked about that a little bit.
I've
been working on it.
I used to work at these schools. It's all right. I had my fill of working at these schools.
Do you want to start a business?
What do you get your greatest joys out of at this point?
Oh, I don't know.
I mean, it's all, it seems to be joy to you at this point.
Writing is fun. Speaking is fun.
Yeah.
I mostly do stuff that's fun. The stuff that winning fights is fun. Fighting the fights is often not fun. The kind of aggro, sitting in a room and shouting your head off at studio people. And
Was there a
vice versa.
time when this wasn't happening for you?
What do you
I'm
mean?
wondering. Well, you know, that where you were in this in-between period where, you know, people weren't really listening to you and you were sort of
Well,
in
I
your
was lucky
own-
enough to join EFF, right? I mean, and EFF has got a great track record. But I mean, with the broadcast flag, when we started the broadcast flag, no one cared and no one knew what it was, and we didn't know what it was. Right? We started going to these meetings so the way that the broadcast flag came about is they held a meeting at the National Association of Broadcasters at like midnight. That was it was open to the public, but they didn't tell anyone that they were having it. And we had a mole who went to it and called us up and they said, "We're not sure. I went to this meeting. I'm not really sure what it is they're doing, but it's freaky and it's open to the public if you know about it. But there's nothing about it on the web. You should go to their first meeting. They're having it in LA next month." It was my first day on the job at EFF. As I showed up at the office, got on an airplane, flew to Los Angeles, and went to this meeting. And we still didn't really get what was going on. And it took about 10, 15 meetings. We were like posting little bits and pieces. We were calling up everyone we knew. We were calling up the Free Software Foundation. We were calling up Red Hat. We were like, "We think that these guys are about to make you illegal. You should come." And they're like, "Well, what are they doing?" We're not really sure. No one was really interested. And it took a long time to turn that into 600,000 letters to the FCC in opposition to the broadcast flag, and millions of people rallying around the cause, and people building their own Myth TV PVRs at home, and now the district circuit court of appeals saying the broadcast flag is illegal and that the FCC isn't empowered to make it, and so on. But that was a long uphill fight. It was very disheartening in places,
So you're participating in WIPO.
Yeah.
Do they listen to you? Can you vote? You can't vote.
No, we don't get to vote because we're not a nation. Only countries get to vote. But they're listening to us, I think, in the sense that. So first of all, the developing nations are really interested in what we have to say, and they can vote. And the thing that I've watched happen at WIPO is we went from having one NGO, which was the Consumer Project on Technology, to 3. I went to my first meeting like 2 years ago, and I was there, and someone from Public Knowledge was there. And now we're up to like 20, 25, and we're growing really fast. And they're freaking out. They're really scared. So we wrote the Geneva Declaration that became the Development Agenda. We're writing the A2K Treaty. At the last broadcasting treaty meeting, I showed up with a letter from 20 webcasting organizations that said Yahoo and Microsoft have told you that they want a webcasting provision in order to be fair to the web industry, but we're from the web industry too, and we think a webcasting provision would privilege their position at our expense, that really what they're doing is they're making their competitors illegal, and we don't want this. And they took it out of the treaty draft. So that was pretty cool. And at the same meeting, they started, so we had all these different NGOs, and what used to happen is the secretariat at WIPO used to do all the photocopying for everyone who brought white papers for the delegations, because the nearest photocopier is way down in Geneva, and WIPO's up at the top of the hill, right? You can't get photocopying done on the premises. And that morning they said, no photocopies for anyone. And of course, the Motion Picture Association has a permanent office. They can send someone over to it, have photocopies made, and come back. We couldn't, so we had to go into town, and we had to make our copies. We came back, we put them all out on the table, went inside, came out 5 minutes later, they were all gone. We were like, wow, those were really popular. So we went back into town, we got some more made, we set them out. They were gone in 5 minutes too, and then I was like, something's not right here. So the garbage in the toilets, under the potted plants, upstairs in the garbage, all over, they've been stealing our papers and throwing them out. Someone had been, and we went to the secretariat, we said, there's a security camera above these, and you could post a guard or something. We posted a guard eventually over the papers, and they wouldn't help us out. And then at the intersessional meeting on the development agenda that just happened in April, we had all these NGOs signed up to go, and they said, we're actually not going to let any of them come. We're only going to let the rights holder NGOs come. Basically what they said was we're going to limit participation to the permanent observers. And the only permanent observers are entities that have been there for years and years and years. All the new guys were ad hoc observers. And the directions said all WIPO observers, and they interpreted that to mean permanent observers only. So we had like 25 NGOs that wanted to go, and they wouldn't come. We had letters from like 700 organizations in protest of this, and national delegates fighting it, and so on. And I figure, Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, and then they fight you, and then you win. So I figure we're like right on victory, Like basically they wouldn't be freaking out like this if if they didn't think that we were doing something that was worth freaking out over, you know? What I've experienced there is that because they've been foxes in a henhouse, they've had no opposition to speak of. They've really gotten away with murder, right? So I sat down with a delegate from one of the developing nations in Africa who had just on the floor explained that they have laws in their country against taking a digital photo of your television while it's on. And I said, like, why do you have these crazy laws? And he said, oh, well, it's easy for you to speak. You're from an American NGO. You encrypt all your important broadcasts. And I said, no, we don't. We don't have any encrypted broadcasts. And he said, well, maybe you don't agree that those are the important broadcasts or which ones are important or whatever. You don't like those shows. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's illegal to encrypt a free-to-air broadcast in America. There never has been an encrypted free-to-air broadcast in America. There never will be. And he went, oh, dear, I'm going to have to speak to Mr. So-and-so. And I went to my sort of mentor at WIPO, and I said, who's Mr. So-and-so? Oh, that's the representative from the American National Association of Broadcasters, who apparently had been flying to this country and telling them lies about how American law works, right? How American regulation works. And so, you know, the ability just to show up in the room and say that's not true, right? That's just not true. The guy from...
So you get to speak.
Oh yeah, we get to make interventions, and actually we've got way better technology than they do. So we bring laptops and we publish Wi-Fi networks off of them. Now there's actually Wi-Fi in the room, but a couple of meetings, you know, for the first year or two, there wasn't any Wi-Fi in the room. So we publish an unconnected Wi-Fi network in the room that we could use to network to each other, and we do IM. So it's really cool. The way that it works is first they have as much talk as you want from all the national delegations. Then they open the floor to the NGOs, and everyone sticks their hands up and they go you, and then you, and then you, and then you, and then you. That's the only chance you get to speak. And depending on where you are in the speaker's order, the guy who comes after you might be from the other side and really get a zinger in. And you've got a rebuttal, but you can't give it. But because we've got IM, we can go, okay, you're coming up next. Just, you know, I know you've only got 3 minutes, but here's 30 seconds. Here's a 30 seconds, right? Which is awesome organization. And then the other thing that we're able to do is we're able to transcribe what's going on. So the normal WIPO transcription process is the Secretariat transcribes what's going on, and then they send the bits that they're going to put in the report to each speaker, and they say, is this more or less what you said, right? And they get to sanitize it, and they condense it, and then 6 months later they publish it, right? And that's the transcript of the treaty meeting. And what we do is we write up what we think people are saying in real time, and then publish it at lunch and dinner, right? And we have 3 people doing it using SubEthEdit. So we have one person typing, we have one person going behind them and catching the typos and adding commentary, and one person going ahead of them, and if someone says, in my speech I will make 3 points related to development, that person goes ahead and writes 3 points, 1.2.3, and tabs it all up so it's all nice and laid out. So literally like seconds after people have finished speaking, it's ready. And you know, we have delegations getting phone calls in the afternoon about things they said in the morning from their national capitals, right? And you know, and not just angry ones, but like we get, you know, the Indian delegation is showered by praise from people in India who are like, holy shit, you are kicking ass, you know? It's great.
But it's a little point that you told that the other guy, he lied. He was caught in a lie.
Yeah.
And I've learned some places that if you're caught in lying lobbying, then you are really in deep shit.
Yeah, not a WIPO.
So the thing is that to sum it up, it's a very dangerous game to invent a truth.
Oh, sure. Well, when there's someone in the room who can fact check you, for sure.
Yes.
And now that, you know, we've got internet, we can actually really do it. So, like, you know, we had the head of the American IP Lawyers Association say, well, the DMCA hasn't been any problem in America. Why, we've just held hearings on the DMCA and they didn't see fit to grant any exemptions to it, which is actually untrue. We helped get exemptions to the DMCA made by the Copyright Office. So we were able to say, no, that's just not true. You know, what you just heard on the floor from someone who absolutely knows better is untrue, right? And so it really makes a difference, right? It doesn't people get in trouble, but it means that the debate is no longer being moved by things that are demonstrably untrue. You know, it's not foxes in the henhouse anymore.
That's the wonder of university teaching. I mean, in our auditoriums we have wired Wi-Fi, like a lot of people have used here, and the response of, you know, quite a few of my colleagues have been that, you know, you have these you say something, and then the students will go like that, and they say, no, that's not true, because check the numbers. And the response of a lot of the faculty is, we want a switch on the wall. That shuts the world out. And say, well, that's, things have changed. That's not the way it is.
I once moderated a panel that on Wi-Fi at PC Forum, and Dan Gilmore was in the audience, and he was blogging it, right, for the San Jose Mercury News. And so he was writing up blog entries about it, and I was reloading it as the speakers were going, and the speaker who'd just come off the stage, off the podium, looked over my shoulder and saw what Dan had written and just took the mic and said, I'm sorry, Dan, you actually got that wrong. Let me clarify that for you. And Dan amended the record. It was just amazing.
One of the great humorous points in the first Jon Johansen court case was when the state attorney said that, I hate to say this, but this young person is actually using Linux. And there was lots of people, there was Wi-Fi in the courtroom, and some people hooked up and looked up a web server to the police. And he just raised his hand and said, can I make a contribution? And I said, the police is actually running Linux as well.
That's great. Yeah. So it's amazing how much a little sunshine can do. I mean, the broadcast flag. That's what happened. Was there were a lot of companies who'd shown up at the broadcast flag, not because on the one hand they kind of felt like they should, and on the other hand they hoped that they would be able to secure a monopoly for their products. That all their competitors would have to take a license for their products when they were implementing DTV technologies, because they'd be one of the approved, blessed technologies, right? And once we started shining a light on that, once we started publishing what was going on, who was in the room, what kind of things they were saying, then all of a sudden those companies started to get a lot more shy about this stuff. They didn't like the idea that they were being exposed while they were doing it. So, just telling people what's going on can be very powerful, I think.
Cory, by the way, have you met Jon? He's right here.
Yeah, hi Jan. I saw you in the audience. I thought it was you. It's really nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Yeah. I hope you didn't mind my taking your name.
Okay. The pronunciation wasn't too. I mean, the way you said his name.
No, I almost said Jan Lech Walesa. Yeah.
That's wrong too, because his name is Lorenzo.
You're right. You're right. No, I'm sorry.
This is John's father.
Yeah, I know. We met before. Anyway, it's an honor to meet you and a pleasure. Thank you for coming.
What's your next thing, Jon? Tell us.
Just let me leave first, okay?